The waves were ruthless that night, angry, cold, and wild. The sound of crashing water was the last thing I heard before everything went black. When I woke up, the world was silent except for the faint whisper of the ocean breathing against the shore. My throat burned with salt, and the sand beneath me felt like needles scraping my skin. For a few seconds, I thought I was dead, but then I saw her, standing there, barefoot, drenched, and trembling. Her white blouse clung to her skin, her hair tangled with seaweed, and her eyes, those piercing green eyes, were filled with the same disbelief I felt. We didn't know each other. Not really. Just two passengers on the same charter flight that was supposed to take us to a private business retreat somewhere near the Pacific coast. And now it was just us. "Where are we?" she whispered. Her voice cracked as if every word took effort. I looked around. The horizon stretched endlessly. No ships, no smoke, no signs of life. Just the wreckage of the plane scattered across the beach and two souls breathing in disbelief. "I think we're stranded," I said quietly. Her name was Evelyn Hart. I recognized her from the pre-flight introductions. The CEO of a major luxury hotel chain. One of those women who walked like they owned the world, and probably did. I, on the other hand, was just an auto mechanic from Portland, hired last minute to fix one of the resort's service vehicles. Different worlds, different lives. But now, none of that mattered. Money, titles, pride, none of it could buy us food, water, or shelter. The first few days were pure survival. We built a small fire using plane debris, collected rainwater, and shared a few scraps from the wreckage. Evelyn tried to stay composed, but I could see her shaking at night, trying to hide her fear behind strength. Once, as the rain poured relentlessly, she sat near the fire, hugging her knees, whispering to herself, "I've never been this helpless." I didn't know what to say. I wanted to comfort her, but words felt useless. Instead, I handed her my jacket and said softly, "You're not alone. We'll figure this out." The days turned into weeks. We made a shelter out of bamboo and palm leaves near the shore. I fished. She learned how to dry seaweed and make it edible. She laughed when I failed miserably trying to open a coconut with a rock, and I laughed when she fell face first in the sand trying to chase a crab. It was the kind of laughter that reminded us we were still human, that despite everything, life still flickered inside us. One night after a storm, we found ourselves sitting by the fire, too tired to talk. The flames danced in her eyes as she stared at me quietly. "You know," she said, her voice trembling, "I spent my entire life controlling everything. Every deal, every person, every mistake. But out here I can't control anything, not even my own fear." I looked at her, trying to find the right response. But before I could, she said something that made my heart stop. "And somehow that's what's keeping me alive." Silence followed, deep and heavy. The ocean roared in the distance, and the fire crackled softly between us. In that silence, something changed. It wasn't just survival anymore. It was connection. Two people stripped of everything, finally seeing each other for who they truly were. Weeks passed and hope of rescue began to fade. We'd built a rhythm, morning fishing, afternoon repairs, and evenings watching the sun melt into the water. Evelyn began to change. The woman who once commanded boardrooms now smiled over small victories, like catching her first fish or making fire without matches. And me, I started seeing her differently. Not as the powerful CEO, but as a woman, vulnerable, kind, beautiful in her rawness. One evening, as the sky turned crimson, she looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Her eyes softened, her lips quivered slightly. "You ever think about what happens if no one comes?" she asked. I nodded slowly. "Every day." She took a deep breath and whispered, "Then maybe we stop waiting for rescue. Maybe we start living." I didn't understand at first, but when she reached out and took my hand, I felt it. The warmth, the pulse, the life we both thought we'd lost. For the first time since the crash, I wasn't afraid. We weren't just survivors anymore. We were something more. That night she told me about her life. The pressure, the loneliness, the mask she wore for the world. "Everyone wanted something from me," she said, staring into the dark. "But no one ever wanted me." And then she looked at me, her voice trembling. "But you never asked for anything. You just showed up." Her words hit me harder than any storm ever could. We fell silent, our hands still joined. The waves whispered against the shore, and the wind carried a strange peace. That night, as we sat under a sky full of stars, I realized something I couldn't ignore anymore. I was falling for her. Part 1 ends with Evelyn leaning closer, her voice a soft whisper over the crackle of the dying fire. "I'm just a woman, and you're what I want." Her confession hung in the air, fragile yet fierce, and I couldn't breathe. The firelight reflected in her eyes, and for that moment, on that forgotten island, I forgot the world ever existed beyond her. And that's when everything changed. When she said those words, "I'm just a woman, and you're what I want," I didn't know how to respond. The world felt still. The fire between us crackled softly, and the wind brushed her hair across her face. For a moment, the island disappeared, and it was just us, two people lost somewhere between survival and something deeper. I could see the fear in her eyes, not of the island, not of the future, but of herself. Of what she was admitting. Evelyn Hart, the woman who built empires, who negotiated billion-dollar deals, was now trembling, vulnerable, and real in a way I never thought possible. "I don't know what to say," I whispered. "You don't have to," she said softly. "Just be here." And I was. For the first time in my life, I didn't think about what came next. We sat there, letting the silence speak for us. I could hear her heartbeat when she leaned against me, slow and steady. The storm inside both of us finally began to calm. The days after that felt different. The island no longer seemed cruel, it felt alive. The mornings were softer, the sunsets lingered longer. Evelyn smiled more. She'd wake up early and walk along the shore barefoot, collecting shells like a child seeing the world for the first time. Sometimes she'd hum songs I didn't know, her voice blending with the sound of waves. I built us a better shelter, and she decorated it with leaves and flowers. We carved out a routine, a quiet, beautiful kind of peace. She often said, "It's strange, isn't it? I had everything out there, but I never felt this free." I'd laugh. "That's because out there you were surviving people. Here, you're living." And she'd smile, her eyes meeting mine, full of something unspoken. Months passed. Our hair grew longer, our skin darker, our hearts calmer. We'd long stopped talking about rescue. This island, with all its wildness and loneliness, had become home. But deep inside, I knew the world wouldn't forget us forever. One morning, I saw smoke in the distance. A ship. My heart raced. I ran to tell her, expecting joy, relief. But when I did, she froze. Her eyes filled with something between shock and sadness. "They found us," she said softly. But her voice didn't sound happy. "This is good," I said, trying to reassure her. "We can go home?" She looked at me, her expression unreadable. "Home," she repeated. "Where is that now?" And in that moment I understood. To her, home wasn't a place anymore. It was what we had built together, what we had become. The rescue team came 2 days later. They found us by the shore, standing side by side. When the helicopter landed, the sound was deafening. Reporters, cameras, voices, all the chaos of civilization returning at once. They took her first. She turned back before stepping inside and looked at me. "I'll see you soon," she said. But the way she said it, it didn't sound like a promise. It sounded like goodbye. I was taken to a hospital, then sent back to the mainland. The world moved fast again. News outlets, interviews, people asking for our story. "How did you survive? Were you scared? Did you know each other before?" I answered what I could, but inside I felt empty. Because she wasn't there. Weeks passed, then months. I tried calling, emailing, reaching her office. No response. She disappeared into her old life as if the island had never happened. I told myself she was busy, overwhelmed, but deep down, I feared something else. That maybe she wanted to forget. One evening I sat by the harbor, staring at the sunset, the same color as it had been on the island, and that's when I heard her voice behind me. "You still watch the ocean, don't you?" I turned, and there she was. Evelyn, no reporters, no assistants, just her. She looked different, softer. Her hair tied loosely, no jewelry, no designer clothes. Just the woman I'd known, the one who laughed when I burned fish, who cried in the rain, who whispered that I was what she wanted. "You came," I said quietly. "I never really left," she replied. "I tried to go back to who I was, but that woman doesn't exist anymore. That island, it changed me." She sat beside me, her shoulder brushing mine. The smell of salt and rain filled the air, and for a while we didn't speak. Then she turned to me, eyes glistening. I told myself I didn't need anyone. But out there, I learned that strength isn't about being alone. It's about finding someone who reminds you why life matters. I looked at her, my throat tight. "So what now?" She smiled faintly. "No, we stop surviving, and we start living together." We sat there as the sun sank into the horizon, the waves whispering their eternal rhythm. She reached out, took my hand, and for the first time in a long time, the world felt right again. Not because we were rescued, but because we were found by each other. As the tide came in and the stars began to appear, she leaned her head on my shoulder and whispered, just loud enough for the wind to carry, "I'm just a woman, and you're still what I want." And I knew then, some stories don't end when you're rescued. They begin when you stop running from what you feel. Because in the end, it wasn't the island that trapped us. It was the fear of being seen, of being vulnerable, of loving without control. But love, real love, doesn't need walls or promises. It just needs truth. And ours began on an island no one will ever find on a map. But I'll carry it with me, always.